Although Japan wasn't initially a target of European exploration, it will become one by the 16th century. So we'll look at how Japan also responds to European contact. Last we left Japan, we saw the development of its feudal system. By the mid 15th century, that system had broken apart, and you had a sort of civil war across Japan called the Sengoku period. This is similar to the Warring States period of China, where different feudal lords and clans fought each other, and this lasted almost 150 years, with no real claimant to the title of shogun. That ended in 1600. One clan leader, Oda Nobunaga, defeated his rivals, but then was betrayed, and one of his generals, Tokugawa Ieyasu, will succeed him and seize control of the title of shogun and consolidate his power. And this is the beginning of an important period in Japanese history called the Tokugawa shogunate, where the Tokugawa family controlled the position of the shogun. And it's during that time that Japan had its first real contact with Europeans. A Portuguese ship wrecked off the coast of Japan, and its sailors were rescued. And that's how the Japanese really got their first contact with Europe. And soon after that, they started getting contact from many different Europeans, in particular the Portuguese and Spanish, but also the English and the Dutch as well. And at first, the Japanese were pretty interested in European trade. Europe had, by this point, some complex technology like mechanical clocks. They had tobacco from the New World, but also really important to the samurai were the firearms that the Spanish and Portuguese had brought them. And they wanted to use these against their rivals as the Sengoku, the Warring States period, kind of petered out. But the Europeans, of course, are not interested not only in trade, but also the spreading their religion. And along with all these merchants came lots of missionaries. In particular, the Jesuits came from Portugal and Spain, eager to spread Christianity to a new land. And at first, the shogun and other Japanese authorities were pretty okay with this. They just sort of took it that Europeans like to, have these missionaries hanging out with their merchants. They really saw them as their kind of merchant. But the missionaries were pretty successful. And by the mid-16th century, you had a number of prominent Japanese converts to Christianity, and this included some samurai families. And this is where the Tokugawa shoguns started to become a little suspicious. They were afraid that Christianity really would conflict with the position of Buddhism and Shinto in Japanese society. And they didn't trust that these formerly loyal samurai families were getting a little too close contact with Europeans. And that erupted into a rebellion as the shogun and some of the lords started to try and stop the spread of Christianity. You had some of the samurai families rebel against the shogun in response to that. And that, for the shogun, was the perfect example of why they didn't trust the expansion of Christianity or the Europeans that had brought it. And this led to a period in Japan called the closed country policy. You can see an abbreviation here of one of the declarations of this. But basically, the Japanese shoguns declared that no one was to leave Japan and no one was to enter Japan. Japan was to become a closed country. They didn't want anybody else's stuff, and in particular their religions and ideas. Nor did they want Japanese going outside of Japan to learn any of this information. There was, of course, still the interest in things like firearms and other, unique goods they couldn't get elsewhere. So there was a law that two countries, the Netherlands and China, could trade in one single port in Japan. But otherwise, the entire country was closed off. And this is really going to be in place until the mid-19th century, when it's forced open later by the United States and other Europeans who were pushing into the second phase of imperialism. But you can see similarities here with China. how at first they were interested in trade, but as you have too much influence from foreigners, and when it interfered with internal politics, they turned towards isolationism. And we'll pick up again on Japan when we get to our unit on imperialism during its second phase in the